chop it up and make you feel the groove. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Okay, here we are. And we are going to do a little tutorial on the chords that you find in a given key. So like what chords are options for you? Maybe if you're composing a song, maybe you are learning a song and you want to better understand the key of the song that you're in. So we're going to talk about those basics. So on the left here, I have Garageband, which I'm about to open. And on the right, I have a program called Finale. And Finale is just like a music notation software program. And I'm going to use these two tools to kind of demonstrate to you chords. And I think it's good to use GarageBand because we're going to use the piano roll, which you're going to be using a lot in composition in GarageBand or whatever DAW you want for that matter. But let's look at this. Let's jump in. Okay, so we have GarageBand open, and when you open it, it pulls up this window like, you know, what do you want to do? So we're just going to pick an empty project. Okay, it's selected, click choose, and it automatically goes to this, you know, big window that we're going to make a little bit smaller. And then it's asking us, it requires us to create at least one track. And a track is just like a fancy way of saying, like, you know, you have the vocal track or you have the guitar track or the piano track. It's like that individual instrument, whatever it is, whether it's drums or whatever, is a track. Now, sometimes you can use a lot of tracks to record one instrument. Like you might have like overhead mics on a drum kit, and then you'll have like individual mics on the different small components of the drum kit. And that, so you could have an instrument across several tracks. But what we're doing here is we're picking a software instrument, and we're going to probably just use the default sound. So it's already selected by default. And then we click create. And then here, you're going to have a few different things. And normally it'd be a little bit bigger. But I want to split screen here. So this here is the library, which you can make go away by clicking this button here in the top left. That kind of like gets rid of a lot of things. Here's like a question thing. If you press it, you can hover over things and get answers. Down here, you have like your controls for whatever your track is. We're not going to need that right now. And right here, you have scissors. This one's actually kind of important. I think they call it an edit window. Yeah, editors button. So by clicking it, you open up your edit window, which is what we're going to use. And I'm actually going to make this a little bit smaller and this a little bit bigger. Okay. Now, your editor window over here, you have a couple different options. You can select piano roll or score. And what score is basically trying to do is create what we're doing over here on the right, which is actually inputting notes. Okay. And over here on the left, we don't need that. Okay. And we don't need our library. So we're going to select this and just kind of get rid of that guy. Okay. So now we're going to enter some notes. And a shortcut, I'm going to give you 3 tiny shortcuts right now to help you operate GarageBand, okay? There's a lot of ways to do things. Like, you know, if you want to play whatever you're working on, you can just click the play button. But the shortcut that I think is really useful is to press the space bar. And what the space bar does is it's basically like a play button. Then if you click the return button, it moves the cursor back to the beginning of your session. Okay, so it's a really good way to start over. You press the space bar to play. Okay, now the third shortcut that I want to tell you about has to do with entering notes into the piano roll. So by pressing the command button, you can look at my mouse. It turns my mouse into like a little pencil. Okay, and by clicking anywhere on this grid with my pencil and I'm holding down the command button, it enters a note. And I can grab the end of this note to make it longer, or I can make it shorter. Okay. So as you can see, this note is highlighted, and it highlights a note over here on the vertical representation of a piano, right? This is as though we took a piano, flipped it on its side, and the lowest notes were on bottom, and the highest notes are on top. Okay? So I'm going to delete this note here, and we're going to start with a C. Okay? Now over here on my piano, on my score, my finale music, I'm going to take this quarter note. I'm going to select a quarter note and enter a note. And I'm going to pick a C. Okay? So you can hear same note. Now, over here, these are quarter notes, and I'm in 4/4 time, okay? This top number refers to how many beats there are in a measure, and the bottom number, this 4, is basically what this gets so confusing for beginners, but this bottom number refers to the type of note. It has nothing to do with this top number. This top number is how many, and this bottom number is what kind. Okay, so this bottom number, the 4 refers to a quarter note over here. So this 4 is secret language for a quarter note. So as you can see, I can put in, 4 quarter notes worth of music into this measure, and that is as many as I can fit. I can't put in another one. It won't let me. This is 4 quarter notes worth of music in this bar of music. Another word for bar of music is a measure, okay? And then it would continue on. Now, if this bottom number here was a 2, it'd be referring to a half note, and it would say like, you have 4 half notes worth of music if this bottom number was 2. You don't really see 2 very often. Very often you'll see the bottom number be 8, and that's referring to this kind of note over here, an eighth note. Okay, so what gets confusing, though, 4/4 is just kind of like the maximal amount of beats per measure, right? But like, let's say I have half notes, right? I can have 2 half notes within a bar of 4/4 because a half note is twice as long as a quarter note, right? So each half note is worth a quarter note, 2 quarter notes worth of music, right? The same is true. I can, delete these here, erase them, and I can put a whole note. And a whole note fills up the whole measure of a bar of 4/4 because this whole note is worth 4 quarter notes worth of music. Okay. And then one final example I'll give of that, just so I can show you, is if I have eighth notes. Okay. Eighth notes, it takes 2 eighth notes to equal the amount of time that a quarter note sustains. Okay. And the word that we would use is duration. Like, how long is this note? Well, a quarter note is twice as long as an eighth note. So if you can fit 4 quarter notes worth of music within a bar of 4/4, then you can fit twice as many notes if they're eighth notes. Okay, so enough about that. I just had to give those little tiny demonstrations for what I'm about to show you. Okay, now over here, we're going to write out our little scale here. This is 1 bar of music, and it's broken down in a grid that has way more than a quarter note, okay? So if I had a whole note for this measure, it would be 1 note that would drag across the whole thing. That's a whole note, okay? Now, if I want a half note, I can shorten this to half of what this bar is, and then I can click and add another note. And GarageBand is pretty intuitive. It's going to say like, oh, this is the length of the last note that you touched. And so I'm going to create a new note the exact same length. So here I have 2 half notes that are on C. So look at what this looks like. When I click the score within GarageBand, it shows me 2 half notes, right? So that's the equivalent of this, right? 2 half notes. Okay. This written out in music is this. This is one ledger line below the staff, or stave for our friends across the pond. Stave, staff here, boom, C and C, C and C. Now, if I take this note and shorten it, and I add a couple more notes, I now have 4 quarter notes worth of music, right? And if I click on the score, you would see 4 quarter notes worth of music, okay? Now I'm going to take all those notes and shorten them by half, okay? And I'm going to add some notes. Now I have 8 eighth notes in a bar of music, right? And over here, I'm not even going to write that out yet, okay? Because I'm going to show you what we're going to do. Now over here, I'm going to take these 8 notes and turn them into a C major scale, okay? Now over here, it's really easy to create a C major scale, but over here, we have to think of the pattern. Okay, so here we have a C. We're going to go up a whole step. So I can drag this note up 2 semitones. Okay. And to spare you the sound of me dragging several notes, I'm going to erase those for the moment. And I'm going to show you with eighth notes. So I have scale degree 1, and I call it scale degree 1 because it's the first step in a C major scale, right? So the step is called a degree on the scale. So this is scale degree 1. This is scale degree 2. Okay? A whole step to scale degree 3, a half step to scale degree 4. Now, I want you to notice here that on the horizontal lines of this grid, you have some lines that are lighter and some lines that are darker. Okay? The lighter lines represent the white keys, the darker lines represent the accidental keys, okay? The sharps and the flats. Now, I want you to get used to your eyes recognizing this grid and not having to look at a piano to the left to see what note you're playing, right? Because if you see the two, like for example, here you have 2 dark keys right next to each other. You have the grouping of 2, the grouping of 3. It's just like a piano. Okay, so right here I can see, boom, that's a C. Because it's just below the grouping of 2 black keys. Okay, so here I have C on a light row, D on a light row, E on a light row, F on a light row, right? E and F are right next to each other without a black key in between. Then I'm going to go up a whole step. This is scale degree 1, 2, 3, 4, whole step to 5, whole step to 6, whole step to 7, and a half step to 1. Okay, so this is going to be a C major scale. So listen to what this sounds like. This is so C major scale. It's awesome. Okay. And it's nice and fast, right? And now if I want to slow that down, I can come up here to the little window and I can slow this down. And I'm going to go down to like, I don't know, 74, 75. It's kind of the tempo of Hotel California. On a dark desert highway, somewhere around there. Perfect. Yeah, it was dead on. Okay. So I'm going to press the return button so that my mouse or my time cursor do guy comes back to the beginning. Notice that this was selected. So if I press play, in Logic it's different. If I would have pressed play, that would have started there. Sorry, in Garageband, it doesn't really matter, I guess. So just press return. It's going to go back to the beginning, and you press play, and it goes up, right? Okay. Now over here, to draw those in, it's just eighth notes. So I'm going to type in, and because my key signature reflects the key of C, and that's to say it has no sharps and no flats in it, as I go up, I just go up by step. Okay? So now I'm going to play this, and it sounds the same as this. Obviously, this performance was faster, And if I wanted to change that, I could come over here to my tempo, set it to 75. And now it's going to be the same. Okay. So once again, C major scale in eighth notes within 1 bar of music, right? 1/4/4 bar of music. This is what it looks like on a piano grid. This is what it looks like on standard notation. Okay. So now we're going to build this out. Okay. So this is where we're getting to the important part of the lesson. We're now talking about harmony. And harmony, think of harmony like, you have a single line of music like this, like these 2 major scales. And they're lonely. They want some friends, right? When you add notes vertically above a note, you start to get harmony, right? And we talked in our last theory lesson about the 1 chord. And the notes in the 1 chord are basically stacked thirds, okay? So over here, I'm going to show you what that means. So here, if I go from C to the very next scale tone, that interval is called a second, okay? However, if I skip this space, if I skip D, this is C, here's D. If I skip D and go to E, I have moved a third, okay? So when I go from line to line or space to space, I'm moving in thirds, okay? Now, this is what we call an ascending third. Ascending means going up, right? If I were to go like this would be a descending third. I'm going from one space to an adjacent space on music, and I'm doing a descending third, okay? Now, a harmonic third is when I stack them on top of each other. And harmonic, as it sounds, is basically an interval. A harmonic interval is notes being played together, and once you start to stack more notes together, you start to get chords, okay? And the first chord that you learn is called a triad, and it's just the 3-note chord, okay? So over here, we have, like over here in the music, we have C, it's that bottom note. E is the bottom line, right? Every good boy does fine. And then G is this top, is the 5th of the chord. So here we have the root of the chord, the 3rd of the chord, and the 5th of the chord. Okay, so on our piano grid, I'm going to press Command to enter a note. So I have C, E, and G. So this is going to sound like a C major chord, because it is a C major chord. It's a C major triad. This triad is a major chord. Okay, it sounds happy, bright, the sun just came out. Now, I want you to notice something. This third of your C major triad is the 3rd note in the scale. Scale degree 1, scale degree 2, scale degree 3. Then the 5th of the chord is scale degree 5. So you see how there's like an every other note quality to building these chords? That's how this works. This is every other note. You have C, every other note. E, G gives you the 1 chord. Okay, now I'm going to come up here to F. Okay, and I'm going to go every other note. So I need F. Here's an F. A third above that is A. And a third above that is C. Okay, so I'm going to draw that over here. So I have F, A, and C. Now I want you to notice what these 2 chords look like. They look the same. It's just this one is starting on scale degree 4 and this one is starting on scale degree 1. They're both major chords, okay? So look at this. You have the root of the chord, and then you go up 1, 2, 3, 4 semitones before you get to the 3rd of the chord, and then you go up 1, 2, 3 semitones. You can see how this bottom interval is greater than the top interval. Okay? Again, the bottom interval is greater than the top interval. That's how this works. It's +4 +3. So from your root note, +4, or a major third, the distance of a major third, that's what 4 semitones is called. It's called a major third. And then from here to here, it's called a minor third. Okay? When you have 3 steps, 1, 2, 3 to get to your next note, it's called a minor third. So by stacking a major third and then a minor third, you get a major chord. Now the outside interval from here to here, the outside interval is 7 semitones. So, right, because we had 4 plus 3. So the outside interval, 7 semitones, that interval is called a perfect fifth. So our major chord is comprised of an inside interval, the bottom inside interval of a major third, and then you can think of the top note as a couple different ways. You can think it's a minor third above the third of the chord, or you can think it's a perfect fifth above the root of the chord. Okay? But you're going to start to recognize this as a major chord. Now, spoiler alert, when you have a key, a major key, there are 3 major chords. The 3 major chords are built off the scale degree 1, scale degree 4, and scale degree 5. Okay? Oh, that's wrong. That goes up 1. Now, you'll see what I did here. This note was low. That's a different kind of chord. See how this looks different than here? This has to go up a semitone, and now this pattern looks the same. If I were to highlight these 3 notes and drag them down to be at the same level as this chord built on the 4th note, notice they're the exact same pattern. So I'm just going to drag this back up to where it was. Okay? And these chords have names. The name for the 1 chord, or the chord built on scale degree 1, is called the 1 chord. And we're going to get into a more technical name and kind of how these chords function in a future lesson. Okay? For today, you're just going to learn the numbers. Now, the number for the chords built on scale degree 1 is called the 1 chord. Can you guess what it's called when it's built on scale degree 4? That's right, the 4 chord. Okay? And then can you guess what this chord is when it's built on scale degree 5? No, it's not that. It's called the 5 chord. So we have a major 1, major 4, and a major 5. Now, have you ever heard someone say, "Oh, it's a 1-4-5 in the key of whatever"? I don't know. You might have heard that. Some songs talk about it, like the song "Hallelujah" by Leonard Cohen, which was covered by Jeff Buckley. If you don't know the tune, you should totally Google it. But it has the line, "I heard there was a secret chord that David played, and it pleased the Lord. Well, you don't really care for music, do you? Well, it goes like this: the 4th, the 5th, the minor fall, the major lift." He's talking about chord progressions. He's talking about these numbers. It goes like this: the 4th, the 5th. And when he's singing that, it goes like this: the 4th, he's playing a 4 chord. The 5th, he's playing a 5 chord. It's pretty cool, pretty clever. It's called Hallelujah if you want to look it up. Okay, so those are the regular major chords that you would find in a song. Now, that doesn't mean these are the only major chords you might find in a song, but these are all the normal ones. Any other major chord that you would find in a key, you're borrowing from a different key. Okay, our song that whether we're composing, or writing or arranging, whatever it is, 99% of the time, it doesn't borrow chords from different keys. I'm going to teach you how to do that, but most of the time, it's just drawing from chords built up from 7 notes of the scale, harmonized in thirds. Okay, so now we have to talk about these other things. We have to figure out what the 2 chord is, what the 3 chord is, what the 6 chord is, and the 7 chord. Okay, now what's interesting is the 1 chord is up here again, right? So we know the 1 chord is just C, E, and G. That one's easy, right? Now, we still only have 3 major chords because this is just an octave up of this one chord. It's not a new kind of chord, it's just a higher C chord. Okay, so let's talk about this guy. This is our 2 chord. It's built on D. Okay, so what is the next note up, okay, in the scale when we're skipping over a note, okay? We're skipping over this note, and our next note is going to be F. Okay, so we have D, F, and now from here, we need to think what's the next scale tone. It's right there, isn't it? Okay, because we have to skip over scale degree 5, okay? And we end up with 2, 4, and 6. 2, 4, and 6 gives us the 2 chord. Okay, so I'm going to put this in. Okay, now this 2 chord pattern is different than this 1 chord pattern. And to demonstrate that, I'm going to drag it right next to it. You notice that the outside intervals are the same distance in these 2 chord patterns. But the middle note for this chord is 1 semitone closer to the root. So where over here we have a major third and a minor third, or 4 semitones and 3 semitones, in this shape we have the reverse of that. We have 3 semitones and then 4 semitones. Okay, so what this gives us is called a minor chord, right? So here we had +4 +3, or a major third and a minor third. Here you have +3 +4. So you have a minor third and a major third. Now, the outside intervals, you can see, is the same, right? So both major and minor chords have a perfect fifth as the outside interval. The inside interval, especially its relationship to the root, really determines what kind of chord this is. Okay, so here we have a major chord, and it's going to sound happy and bright and sunny. Here we have a minor chord, and it's going to sound sad. Okay, so I'm going to flip over here. If I were to write these out, this is how I would have to write it out. Okay, so here I have C, E, G already written out. That's like this first example, C, E, and G. Now over here, I'm going to do the same thing, but notice how this middle note is on a black dark line, okay? So I actually have to lower this note. So C, E doesn't work. I need to lower that, so I grab a little flat symbol to make it C, E, and G. I'm going to remove that and give myself the G. So you notice these 2 chords, C, E, G, and C, E flat, G, are going to sound different. So I'll just play from the beginning. You're going to hear the C major scale at the beginning of it. That's the difference between a major chord and a minor chord, right? They sound different. Major, happy, minor, sad. Okay, so now I'm going to take this chord and move it back to where it belongs in the space of the 2 chord. So the 2 chord is minor. That's just how it works out. So the 1 chord has 1, 3, 5. The 2 chord has 2, 4, 6. The 3 chord has 3, 5, 7. Okay, and spoiler alert, 3, 5, and 7 give you a minor chord as well. Notice how they're the same pattern. This chord and this chord are the same pattern. I'm going to put it back to the 3 chord spot. Then you have a half step to the 4 chord, which is major, 5 chord, which is major. Then here we're on the 6 chord. Okay, now the 6 chord has 1. I'm going to scroll this a little bit here because we have scale degree 6, 7, 1. That's the end of our scale. I'm going to just draw in a couple notes higher. So this is scale degree 2 and scale degree 3. So for our 6 chord, it has 6, 1, and 3. 6, 1, and 3. And it's a minor shape, right? You have a minor third here, and then you have a major third here on top, so that gives us a minor chord. Okay, now over here is our 7 chord. Now for our 7 chord, I got to add one more note over there. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like the beginning of a major scale again, right? This is my 7 chord. And every other note for the 7 chord is that. Now that should sound a little bit different to you. It should sound a little bit like a horror movie. Listen. Okay. What that is a different kind of chord. And I'm going to show you. So here we have a 6 chord, which is minor. And here we have the 7 chord. And I'm going to drag this down so we can compare it. So 6 chord, you have a minor third and a major third. Look what you have here, something totally different. You have a minor third on the bottom, and then you have another minor third. Okay, so here this bottom inside interval is a minor third. The top inside interval is a minor third. But now the outside interval from there to there is only 6 semitones. It's not the 7 semitones that give us a perfect fifth, okay? And what we call that in the theory world is a diminished fifth, okay? So it's not perfect, it's diminished. If it were raised, it'd be an augmented fifth, right? But this is a diminished fifth. Actually, we would call that like a minor 6 for what it's worth, but for the advanced kids, you just understood what I said. But here we have a diminished fifth. Okay, I'm going to take this whole triad, this diminished triad, 3-note chord, and I'm going to drag it back up to scale degree 7. Okay, now I'm going to get rid of these notes because they're a little confusing. So here I have a chord built along every step of the way. So it's a total of 7 chords, and then the 1 chord is repeated up an octave. Okay, so I have major chords. I have a major 1, I have a major 4, and I have a major 5. Those are my major chords. And then I have the major 1 again up an octave. Okay, for the minor chords, I have a minor 2, a minor 3, and a minor 6. And for my 7 chord, I have a diminished 7. And then that's it. Those are the regular chords that you would hear in a song. Okay, so I'm going to show you over here what this kind of looks like. And I'm going to use quarter notes to demonstrate. Okay, so here I had a C major scale. You know, actually, I'm going to use eighth notes so that it matches my other document. Okay, so here I have a C major scale. And by harmonizing it, I'm just going to move up in thirds. Now, this is easier to do this than it is on the piano roll. Because on the piano roll, you have all of the notes, right? But this is what key signatures does in a really cool way. It gets rid of notes that are not in the key. So check this out. Line, line is a third. Space, space is a third. My eyes are not very good. Sorry about that. So here I have thirds now, and you can hear what this sounds like. It's just a C major scale harmonized with a third above each step of the scale. Cool, right? Now, I can put a fifth above each of those notes. It's just a third above. Okay, so here I have little triads. I have 3-note chords that are stacked on top of each other. Now, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry. But I want to point something out here. This is where, you have to kind of learn theory a little bit. Like, I know that this is a major chord because I know it's C, E, and G, and I know that that builds a major chord. But you don't really see it the way that you do on a piano grid. On a piano grid, because the piano grid contains all of the notes, even the in-between notes on the grid, it's very easy to see how these patterns emerge. Whereas on standard notation, you don't see those in-between notes because the lines and spaces only represent notes that are in the scale, notes that are in the key. Okay. And to get any of the in between notes that are not being used, for example, over here, anything on this like darker lines, because they represent the accidentals, and our key of C doesn't have accidentals. Anything like that over here, you have to use a sharp or a flat to have those notes show up at all. So it's really easy to draw on standard notation triads that are stacked in thirds, right? But you have to kind of know the theory to know, oh yeah, this is a little C major chord. This is D because it's built on D, and it's a minor chord above it because we know this pattern D, F, and A gives us the pattern of a minor 2 chord. So this is D minor. This is E minor because it's built on this E. This is F major, right? From E to F is a half step. Now, on music, you just have to learn that because it's not like this looks any more or less like a half step than this does. But because you're familiar with the piano, that from E to F, you have a half step. Then here we have a really cool chord that I didn't mean to create. Here you have a G major chord. It's a 5 chord in the key of C because it's built on the 5th scale degree. Here you have a 6 chord in the key of C because it's built on the 6th scale degree. This is an A minor, and minor is referring to the chord type, and A is referring to the note that it's built on. It's the root of the chord. Here you have a B diminished triad, which you know because over here you see that B gives you a diminished chord. You have a minor third above and a minor third above, or the outside interval is a diminished fifth. That gives you a diminished triad, which happens at the 7th scale degree of every major scale. All right. We are approaching the end of this lesson. But what this should do is put some walls around the playground. And I'm going to talk about this some more, but walls around the playground. If you have no walls around a playground, kids will play in the middle of the playground because they feel safe. They feel safe in the middle. If you put a fence around the perimeter of a playground, kids will play all the way up to the fence because they feel safe. In music, there's so much we can do, and putting walls around our playground helps us make decisions and not drowned in option anxiety. Okay? So these are the normal chords. I'm going to teach you how to break all of these rules and have all the crazy cool chords, but these are the ones that you would normally see. Okay? 1 chord, 2 chord, minor 2, minor 3, major 4, major 5, minor 6, diminished 7, and then your 1 chord again. That's what you're going to hear in a song. Okay? We're going to get rid of this program here for a moment. Okay. When you have a song or when you're writing something, think of these as like your options, right? So the most basic song, you might have something like a 1, a 4, and a 5. Okay. So a 1 chord, I can even just copy this. I'm going to move the cursor here. Here's my 1 chord. And I want this chord to maybe happen a few times. Okay. I'm going to copy, Command V, paste. Okay. Now, this is a C major chord, C major chord, C major chord, right? C, E, G, C, E, G, C, E, G, C, E, G. Okay. I'm going to get rid of some of these notes. Maybe I'll get rid of that one and that one and that one and that one. And I'll get rid of the bottom two and that. Okay. What I have here is what we call a broken chord. Okay. We broke it. Instead of playing it harmonically like we have over here, we have now arpeggiated it. We have taken the notes and separated them so that they're not occurring at the same time. So listen to what this sounds like. Okay. That bar of music is a C chord. The overall harmonic content of that bar of music is a C chord. Sounds like a C chord. Okay. So this is a major shape, right? If I were to drag these notes back, you would see a familiar shape. It's a C major chord, just like my one chord over here. Okay. I'm going to put those back though. Now, this was built on C, right? I can even take this, highlight them all, Command C to copy it, place my cursor where I want it to paste, and press Command V. Okay. Now I have an identical pattern. Here's a C major chord arpeggiated or with the chord broken, and here's another one. Okay. Now I'm going to take this one and drag it up to F. Okay. So let me think about where that target is. This is where I'm shooting for. Okay. This is F. So I'm going to hide that right there just so you can see. Okay. This is scale degree 4 of my C major scale, right? I have 1, whole step to 2, whole step to 3, half step to 4. Okay, so this little guy is my target. I'm going to take these guys and drag them up so that the root of this chord is now F. So I still have a major pattern that is arpeggiated, but it's built on this F. Okay, now I'm going to delete this little marker that I was using as a guide. Now listen to what I have, okay? And I'm going to click and drag up in here. And what this does, creating this little yellow region, just means it's going to loop this section when I press play. Do you see how this cycle repeat guy is highlighted? That's, if I click on that, that's this, okay? So with it clicked off, I can just do that in this part in GarageBand and highlight that region, or that's part of the region, and it's going to loop play. Okay, so listen, here's my 1 chord going to a 4 chord. Okay, so I'm getting somewhere. I'm starting to develop and create music, okay? Maybe I want my song to do that for 2 bars. Okay, I'm gonna paste that. Okay, so now I have 2 bars. I liked how that sounded. I used my trackpad to resize that, but you can also use this little dial here to resize. Okay, so 1 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, 4 chord. Now, let's say I want to go to a 5 chord. Okay, I'm going to copy this little major chord, make sure that my cursor is where I want it. So here I have another 4 chord. I'm going to take this, drag it up a whole step. There's 1 semitone, 1 more step. Okay, now I have a 5 chord. So listen to what that sounds like. I'm going to go from 1 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, 4 chord, up to a 5 chord. Listen. Four chord. There it is. 5 chord coming up. Maybe I go back down to a 4 chord. And then maybe I go back to a 1 chord. Oh my gosh, this song slams so hard. And then maybe, just to finish up, I'm going to give myself a big long C. Maybe I'll even do a harmonic third above that and a fifth. So here I have a C triad, not broken, but like fully sustained. Okay, so let's see what this sounds like. Starting on bar 2. 5 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord. Dope. Now, upon listening to my song, I thought, I really wish I had one minor chord in there to really kind of like spice it up. It didn't really do it for me. I needed something more. Okay, so where can I fit that in? There's a 1 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, 4 chord, 5 chord, 4 chord, and then 1 chord. I'm going to take this 4 chord. And if I hold that bottom note, look at what it says underneath. It says F3, right? Because that's the note that I'm clicking and holding. If I click and hold this, oops, it's going to say A3, right? Because that's what this note is. This note is an A3. Okay, so I'm going to grab this whole 4 chord and drag it from F a whole step up to G. That's the 5 chord, and then a whole step up to 6, which is the 6th chord. Now, here's my problem, though. This is my problem. This pattern is a major chord. Okay? This pattern is a major chord, but my 6th chord is supposed to be minor. Okay? So this note and this note, I can highlight them both by either clicking and dragging, or I can click one and press shift and click the other one. This third has to go down a half step. Now, just to demonstrate here, look, we're in the key of C. There should be no black keys, right? So look here. These notes are on a black key. That should be my first red flag that, gosh, this note shouldn't be in here. So I'm going to click this and drag them both down. So here now, if I were to drag these over, this looks like a minor chord. Okay. So here now I have a minor 6 chord, and I'm going to make this a 4 chord just to see what it sounds like. And then I still end on the 1 chord. Okay. A big part of like feeling completion is a song usually starts on the 1 chord and it usually ends on the 1 chord. That's how songs typically go. We'll explore other options as well, but that's pretty normal. Okay, so I'm going to press play, spacebar to press play. That's the 1 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, 4 chord. And change it up with a 5 chord, 6 chord. Oh, pretty. That's minor, then 4 chord. I didn't really care for the 4 chord. It didn't do it for me. I'm going to take it up to a 5 chord. So I'm going to take this F chord. See how I'm hovering over it and it says F3. This is the major chord broken up, but built on this little root. I'm going to drag this up a whole step to the 5 chord. Okay. Let me hear what the end of my song sounds like here. So here I have the 5 chord going to the 6 chord, going back to the 5 chord, to the 1 chord. Let me see. I'll back up here to this 1 chord. 4 chord, 5 chord, 6 chord. I still hate it. What I actually want to do is make the first part of this a 4 chord and make the back, leave that as the 5 chord. Kind of like that better. Okay, now in our first little experiment of composition, we played, right? We discovered. We broke things up. We used these notes as a template to know kind of what is going on. But this, in general, gives you pretty normal sounding music. Okay? And that's okay. You want to learn how to do all of it, right? Because most of what you hear on the radio Most of the big hits are normal sounding stuff. No, that's not true. There's still crazy stuff that happens. But you kind of learn what the crazy stuff is as compared to what's normal. Okay. So this was all built off a C major scale. And we harmonized it in thirds. And by harmonizing it in thirds, it gave us chord content to build a song. We broke up a chord and created a little motif or sequence of notes that we then repeated, but in a different chord, right? This was our 1 chord, this was our 4 chord, but it was the same pattern. It was the same arpeggio, root, third, fifth, third. Here we had a root, third, fifth, third. Okay. The last thing I'm going to say that I think you should really program into your brains are a couple concepts. What are the numbers in this chord? It's scale degree. The 1 chord has scale degree 1, 3, and 5. Can you memorize that? What scale degrees are in the 1 chord? 1, 3, and 5. Okay. So what is the third of the 1 chord? Scale degree 3. What's the fifth of the 1 chord? Scale degree 5. Up here. Okay. The 2 chord is minor. And it contains scale degrees 2, 4, and 6. Okay. 2, 4, and 6 are the scale degrees in the 2 chord. Okay. What's the third of a 2 chord? Scale degree 4. What's the fifth of a 2 chord? Scale degree 6. What's the root of a 2 chord? Scale degree 2. Okay. Then you have the 3 chord, scale degree 3, 5, 7. It's also minor. The 4 chord is major, scale degree 4, 6, 1. This is where it starts to get confusing because the top note, the fifth of the 4 chord, is scale degree 1, right? So now you have to think in terms of like another octave of the scale, right? So if the 4 chord is 4, 6, and 1, the 5 chord is going to be scale degree 5, 7, and 2. So what's the fifth of a 5 chord? Scale degree 2. What's a third of a 5 chord? Scale degree 7. Okay. The 6 chord. What notes are in the 6 chord? What scale degrees? Scale degree 6, 1, 3. What's the third of a 6 chord? 1. Scale degree 1. What's the fifth of a 6 chord? Scale degree 3. Good job. And then finally, our diminished chord, which is built on scale degree 7. You have scale degree 7, 2, 4. Okay? 7, 2, 4 gives you your 7 chord. And this chord we don't use a lot. We don't use the diminished chord very often because it sounds like a horror movie. In fact, the chords that are most commonly used, oh, wrong button. Most commonly used are the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord. And that's because they sound happy and major. They're major chords. So those are the most common ones, okay? Sometimes, if you're going to introduce one more chord into a song, it tends to be the 6th chord. Okay, so listen to what this sounds like. Here's a 1, 5, 6, 4 in the key of C. Listen to what I just said. Here's a 1, 5, 6, 4. That's me as one musician talking to another musician, telling you the chord progression. I'm saying we're in the key of C, and this is a 1, 5, 6, 4. Okay, so a 1, 5, 6, 4 is a C. The 5 chord is built on this G right here. And then 6 chord. And then 4 chord. One, 5, 6, 4. I can't tell you how many songs have been used with that progression. I'm just going to grab a guitar real quick. This is a one chord. 5 chord, 6 chord, 4 chord. It's like every song. It's like definitely every song from the 90s. That's it. This was a lot of information, but you hung in there, you did it, and I'm super proud of you. I'm so excited for the implications of this because check this out. This is so cool. Look at these notes. That's the key of C. If I take all of this and drag it up to where this bottom note is D, this is now the key of D. These are all the chords for the key of D. We have D major, E minor, F sharp minor, G major, A major, B minor, C sharp diminished, and then D again. And we're going to cover that. We're going to cover it all, but this pattern doesn't change. In the key of D, your 1 chord, that's the wrong button. Your 1 chord, your 4 chord, and your 5 chord are still major, no matter what key you're in. If I drag this whole thing up, it's the most obnoxious sound when I do that, and I acknowledge that, and I'm sorry. Here's this again. Here, what I'll do. Let's see if that fixes it. I'm going to highlight them all, bring my volume back up. If I take this and drag it up to well, that's E flat or D sharp, it calls it. But here's E. These are all the chords in the key of E. You have an E major, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A major chord, B major chord, C sharp minor, D sharp diminished. The pattern doesn't change. The pattern stays the same. Now you're going to have to memorize better what notes are in the key in terms of like naming things, but in terms of visually seeing that this is a major chord, that doesn't change. It's the same for all the keys. And the implications are awesome because it means once you really, really understand this, like the floodgates are opened and you can create so much music. And you don't have to be limited by like, oh, I don't know, what note should I do? Like you're just going to know you have all these options. Okay. So I'm super proud of you. Hang in there. We're doing a good job. And we'll see you in a couple days with another lesson. Bye.